As an outdoor photographer, you never truly know what you're going to see and photograph when you're out with your camera. Some days fill you with more optimism than others. This day was one of those days for me. I was optimistic for a good sunrise, but what I didn't know was that I was about to see and capture one of the most beautiful sunrises I had seen this year. You really don't want to miss this video. Before we start the story, just to let you know, this video is part of a 2021 Photography Vlogmas playlist. If you'd like to support the YouTube vloggers taking part, you can access the playlist via the link in the video description. Now, back to Tuesday morning and a truly unforgettable sunrise shoot. Well, good morning and welcome to a very crisp, frosty morning here in the northeast of Scotland. It's currently 3 to 4 hours until Storm Barra is due to hit the country. So we've currently got this beautiful, very still morning. There's not a breath of wind in the air. It's just beautiful. And I imagine we've got quite a treacherous day ahead of us. But right now, I'm thinking about the present moment and the beauty that surrounds me here. And although it's been quite a crisp, clear night, we're starting to get these beautiful wispy clouds on the horizon here, which I'm hoping are going to light up really fiery red in the next half an hour or so. Although we've got all this frost and ice here this morning, I'm heading to the beach because it's low tide, and my plan is to find some pools of water to hopefully get those lovely wispy clouds reflected within them. So let's head to the beach, and maybe on the way back I'll photograph some of this ice too. This is so exciting. Well, I'm not convinced that my plan for this morning is going to work. The moment I came over the sand dune to the beach, I noticed that there is no pools of water. There's some areas like this beside me that have got that wet sand, which will allow, if the clouds light up, for some nice reflections and colours on that wet sand, which could rescue the day. But what I was really hoping for this morning, with it being low tide, was to capture some really beautiful pools of water, lines in the sand, textures and patterns, like I did about 1.5 years ago when I was on this very beach for sunrise in the summer months. That shoot was one of the best shoots I've ever had here, and I was hoping to recreate that this morning, but with a fiery sunrise. And as you can see, the pools of water just aren't here. We've just got that wet, flat sand, which in some ways is a shame, but I'm out, I'm here, and I'm going to try and make the most of this. We've still got about 40 minutes until sunrise, so I'm expecting potentially for the clouds to start lighting up soon, if it's going to happen, and we'll just see how the morning unfolds. That's the best thing to do, not to feel disheartened when things don't turn out the way you hoped, because nature is unpredictable, but just get on with it and see what you can create with what you have. It's now half an hour later, and I think some mornings, especially when you're photographing around sunrise or sunset in the evening, as you will all know, the conditions can change very quickly, and when you're trying to vlog and do photography at the same time, it can be very challenging and you can miss photographic opportunities. So this morning I prioritised photography. I took a number of B-roll shots of what was going on around me so that I can explain to you now all of the images that I've just taken, because the last half an hour has been pretty incredible but also very challenging. So where do we begin? We begin at photograph number 1, and photograph number 1 was a very different image, probably something that a lot of you will think, why on earth have you photographed that, Kim? But my reasoning is, for this photograph you're about to see, is when I arrived I was struggling to find a composition, and one thing that many people do on mornings like this morning is they see a beautiful sunrise and they find a wet bit of sand and they photograph a mirrored reflection, which can look really, really nice, but it often creates very flat images. And I took a shot, which I'll show you now, to showcase this to you. The colours are beautiful, you've got lovely reflections on the sand, but it is a very flat image. But when I was taking this shot, I noticed that beside me was a bit of fishing rope that had been washed up from the sea. And this part of the coastline in Scotland is very industrial when it comes to fishing, and you very regularly see a lot of fishing nets washed up on the beach. So one thing I thought would be quite good was to photograph this net, where it had landed on the beach. And what I liked about it was not only the way this net had landed on the beach, but the fact that there was a number of lines and patterns in the sand around it, which showcased that it had probably been left on the beach with some force, and then it had settled there overnight at its final destination. And one thing I've noticed is when I'm out photographing around golden hours is it's not always the sunrise or sunset itself that causes beauty in the landscape. It's sometimes the light that it casts onto other subjects and objects. And I really liked the light that was being cast on the sands when at that moment in time. So I took this shot that you're about to see of the netting washed up on the beach. And although it's not showcasing the sunrise at its best, it's something a little bit different. And it's nice, I think, to experiment with different subject matters. So that was the first image that I took this morning, which, I don't know, I quite like it. It's strangely not normally my style, but I loved the colours and that subtlety of the sands and the reflections that were being cast around that fishing net. But then the sunrise really kicked off, and because there was just this wetness on the beach with not much foreground interest, I headed down to the sea itself. And because I've got wellies on, I went wading into the water to try and find some images. And as the tide was sort of surging in and out with the wave, there was this lovely line of gulls on the shore's edge, and I took some shots of them against this beautiful subtle pinky sky that we had, and some of them were flying around and other ones were just perched on the sand. So I used a variety of shutter speeds, some to get some frozen images of the gulls and some to get some shots of the gulls frozen on the sand, but the ones that were flying around are a bit of a blur, to show the almost chaotic effects of these birds flying around in the early morning light. Now that was partly caused because it was still quite dark, and trying to get a fast enough shutter speed even by bumping up my ISO was difficult. But I actually like that motion of the gulls because, like I say, it showcases that chaotic element of the gulls flying around frantically on the shore's edge. And yeah, I took these images here, which I'm not sure if I like them, but I'm going to show them because it's something that caught my eye, and I think you'll probably see from these images why it was something that interested me. I then turned my attention to the actual sunrise, and we had this beautiful fiery sky, the sort of sunrises that every photographer dreams of. But because of where I was really struggling to get a good image of that fiery sky. So I turned back towards the sand dunes, and I found, while I was in the sea, some patterned areas in the pools of water that were created at the sea's edge. And I tried to use them to create some interest in the images so that they weren't really flat and disinteresting. And I'm not again sure if I'm that happy with how these images turned out, but if you compare it to the image that I showed you first, with the flat sand and the reflection but with no foreground interest and nothing to create that 3D effect within the image, I'm sure you'll agree these are much better in comparison to that. So I'll share them with you now before I get onto the images that I really liked. Now, it's become quite clear to me, especially I think in the last year or so, that a lot of us, when we go out to shoot sunrises, we focus on that fiery sky, and it's easy to see why. That beautiful reds and oranges and yellows in the sky, and that reflected onto water or ice or whatever you may be shooting, can create some amazing images. But actually, the light that really speaks to me is this light that we've got behind me right now. These subtle pinky, purpley blue tones that you get in the opposite direction to the sunrise. And these are where I think some of my favourite shots of this morning came. And you'll see behind me there are these bits of seaweed that are stuck in the sand. And they're creating really nice reflections on the sand themselves. And I took images from both sides of these seaweeds. So I initially tried to use the fiery sky behind them, and I used that reds and orange tones with the reflections to create these images here. But I then discovered that although they were quite interesting in many ways, that actually the best light I found that worked with these was the light in the opposite direction, that colder tones, because the sand itself is quite a cold colour, and this morning is obviously very frosty and cold. So although you had that fiery contrast going on in the sky, I really wanted to showcase the feeling through colours of what the weather's actually like this morning. And by turning 180 degrees away from the sunrise, I was able to take these shots here, which utilise these beautiful reflections of these pieces of seaweed as they're reflecting on the wet sand, but with that more bluer tones in the sky behind them. So that was the images that I took this morning, and the sun actually hasn't risen yet, but we're in that 5-10 minutes between the fieriness and the orange glow. So I don't know whether the golden light this morning is going to cast any more interest onto this beach. That's yet to be seen. But while we've still got a little bit of those nice tones in the sky behind me, I'm going to take my camera off my tripod now and do a little bit of ICM, because I think ICM works very, very well with these more subtle tones that we've got behind me. And some of you have asked if I can share and teach the settings for ICM. So my plan is, in the new year, I'm going to sit down and make a video about how to actually achieve ICM through what settings to use and motion of moving your camera and stuff. So if you are interested in ICM, please stay tuned for that. If not, stay tuned, see how these images go, and then we might get some nice golden images too. So anyway, let's get on and take these shots before that light disappears for good this morning. Well, I have to say, every image I took in this video turned out better than I'd expected them to. It just shows that you can never truly know how well a photo shoot has gone until you get home and look at those images on the computer. I hope you've enjoyed me sitting down and talking through my thought processes behind all the images taken in this video. If you haven't done so already, remember to check out the other photographers taking part in this Vlogmas playlist. As always, I want to say a huge thank you for watching, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you all again next time.